So I'm going to make sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is a fermented vegetable and it's cabbage. This is a head of Savoy cabbage, and of course sauerkraut is wonderful because it's oozing with lots of lovely probiotics for your tummy, and it keeps well. You know, if you've got vegetables in the fridge that perhaps you're not going to use up, it's a good thing you can preserve them by fermenting. Chop it in half again, and get rid of this little bit just here because that's what holds it together. That's it. And then you can easily chop it up. I have a clear glass bowl here, so I'm going to put a bit of salt in the bottom, and as I go I'm going to layer cabbage with bits of salt, just bits of salt as it goes through it. And this is unlike vegetable fermenting, because in vegetable fermenting I might soak something in water. For sauerkraut, I actually need to use the moisture within the cabbage. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So I've chopped all the cabbage and layered some salt throughout it. And the next part, a machine won't help you. You've literally got to get your hands in there and really work it. And there's no water in here. You have literally got to squeeze the water out of the cabbage. It's very, very labour intensive, and it takes a lot of strength, and it's going to take you a while because you need to bruise the cabbage and pound the salt throughout it. When I said labour intensive, I'm going to be here for 20 minutes at the very least. So I've been pounding this cabbage now for about 20 minutes. It really is a labour of love. You have to get your hands in there, squeeze it between your hands, mash it, keep turning the bowl, and some people do it in a bucket, a food bucket of course, not one you use any chemicals in. And that is a head of cabbage, and I've literally had to squeeze all the water out of it. So now I have a clean jar, and this is a good jar with a lid that doesn't fit on too tight, because when the sauerkraut is fermenting, some of the gases need to escape. In the bottom of it I put a little salt, and I put some caraway seeds. I like caraway seeds with the sauerkraut because it gives it a sort of nutty flavour. And now you have to pack it in to the jar. There's lots of fluid in there because that's what you squeezed out of it. And of course you will be using that fluid in the jar. And with sauerkraut, if it's a young cabbage, then it will have lots of juices in it. But if it's an old cabbage, they can be a bit dry. Try and avoid old cabbages. For a young cabbage, you should be able to ferment it in its own juice. For an older cabbage, you may have to add a little juice, which isn't particularly ideal. So it all goes in. This is a whole head of cabbage that I'm attempting to get into one jar. I'm sort of hoping that it's going to fit nice and snug and tight. So this is the cabbage jammed down into the jar. And what I'm hoping is that I can get it all in. And the fluid and everything, in that it is fermenting in its own juice. And we're looking pretty lucky. Yeah, all looks good. Everything goes in. And that's good. Every last drop. Wonderful. Okay. So again, I'm going to ram it down into the jar. I want it to be compacted. And I don't know if you can see, but its own juice is right up to the top, which is fantastic. It's lovely. It's exactly what I want, that it's covered in its own juice. And I'm pushing it down very much all the way around, so it's all crammed in. Marvellous. Great. Just tiny little bit of salt on the top, tiny little bit. And now I'm going to take a leaf. What I'm going to do is I'm going to force the leaf down on top of it. And this is to constrict it down into the jar. Right down into the jar. So that it's keeping it down into the jar. Now when it ferments, air is going to come up. Lots of gases are going to come up, and it's going to be bubbling. Be bubbling for days. And we want to make sure that it stays in the jar. It doesn't come up to the top as it's exposed to air, because if it's exposed to air, then that goes fungusy on the top, and we don't want that. You can always tell with sauerkraut if fungus has taken effect, because it goes pink, and you really don't want that. So that's looking really good. That's down nicely. I haven't added any extra fluid, but what I will do is put the lid on now. Now this is good because not too tight, not too tight. Now I shall put this aside for 4 days to 2 weeks. Because it's fairly finely chopped, it'll process quite quickly. Sometimes what I might do is put a few big pebbles in the top that have been thoroughly cleaned, of course. That weighs it down. Or you can actually put a plastic bag of water in the top, just so that it keeps it forced down. You put the little bag there like a sandwich bag, and then you pour the water in the sandwich bag until it's full, and then you snap it. But you mustn't let that water get into this water, so it must be a very firm sealed bag. But that looks okay. You know, there's a little space at the top, but the leaves are keeping it well down. I should put this aside now, and I'll put it on a plate or a saucer, because As it ferments, the gases will come out, liquid will come out, and if you put it on a bench top, it's going to stain the bench top. So put it on a dish that's going to catch the excess fluid as it comes out. Check it every few days, because if the fermentation goes really furiously and you haven't got any fluid left in the top, you need to add a little fluid. It always needs to be underneath the fluid. So, about 2 weeks maximum. Some people even leave it for a month. The longer you leave it, the more tangy it's going to become. So you leave it and then you put it in the fridge. Now when you put it in the fridge, it stops fermenting. The cold in the fridge stops it fermenting straight away, and you can leave it in the fridge for about 3 months. So you've got 3 months worth of sauerkraut, and you take a little out at a time as a condiment.